And to me, what the pieces that you just described of the Enneagram journey is just, it dovetails with what I believe God is about in the transformation he invites each of us into. I do a lot of my work in helping people understand and move forward in spiritual transformation. And a roadblock that I often hear from them is, well, you know, I'm doing this, and God said he would do this, and it doesn't seem like I'm any different. It doesn't seem like I've changed, and they want to be zapped from here to there. And that's not how human beings function. I don't see that very often God does things that way. And so just the way you described, no shame, but honestly, you know, where we are and where we are invited to go to become more whole, to me, that's good news. With all the angst that is going on in our world, are you experiencing transformation? I'm Dr. Carol, and thank you for being here. The process of transformation is something that many of us struggle with. The Enneagram, very popular right now, but when it's put in its proper context, can be a beautiful tool to experience that very kind of transformation. Now, maybe like you you are a bit literate in the Enneagram. Maybe you know your number and have, kind of thought a little bit about what that means. But are you experiencing that as a doorway, a tool to your journey of transformation, the journey that God has for you to become? My guest today is an Enneagram master. Suzanne Stabile is a highly sought after Enneagram teacher, an author. I first became aware of Suzanne a few years ago when she co-authored a different book, and she now has released a beautiful book, The Journey Toward Wholeness, Enneagram Wisdom for Stress, Balance, and Transformation. How we need this right now. The stress, the divisions in our world, and the stress of the pandemic, just a couple examples of the mess that all of us wrestle with. And how can the Enneagram help us achieve balance and transformation, even right with all that is going on? I just want to get right into this conversation. We're going to be talking about the different centers of intelligence that the Enneagram makes clear and what that means for different types, and specifically about important spiritual practices that are especially applicable depending on your different type and why that can help you achieve balance and transformation. I know that this will be super practical, and I find it super interesting. So, Suzanne Stabile. Well, Suzanne Stabile, I consider it such an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us today. First of all, just welcome and thank you.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you. And I love to talk about what I love to teach. Yeah. And I also really love to talk with people I've not met before or talked with before. So it's a treat for me.
Well, I first came to know about you a few years ago when you and Ian Morgan-Cron wrote The Road Back to You. That was my introduction to the Enneagram. I know the Enneagram has been around for centuries, and you have been a master and teacher of this for 35, 40 years, but I had only peripherally heard about it. That was my introduction. And I just got to be transparent here as we begin. For the first while, I struggled to really resonate with a particular type. I'm a hard driver. I work hard. I put a lot into my career for years. So I thought, well, maybe I'm a 3. And then, well, I'm always trying to get better. And when my husband was alive, he told me, you're your own worst critic and all that. So maybe I thought I was a 1. But I finally came to understand that I'm a 5. And I will just tell you that the thing that made a difference for me, that finally resonated, is I realized that thinking was the water I had been swimming in, and I didn't even realize I was wet. From the time I was a kid, I would always go up into my head. whenever there was a problem, I would try and figure it out. And in my own journey, the mess that I had come through, I remember the dominant thing that I would go to was in my head trying to figure it out. And that just so resonated with me once I finally got it, that it was just what I'd been in all my life. And I didn't even realize how much that defined how I brought myself to the world.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I just don't think as a 2. So that's a long journey for me.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that we get so comfortable using 2 of 3 centers of intelligence, thinking, feeling, or doing, that we don't even miss the other one until it is identified for us that we're not using all 3. And then with just a little work, we seem to have more energy and more space and fewer momentary crises, it seems.
And that is such a core message in your book, The Journey to Wholeness. And I love the wholeness paradigm in which you talk. This isn't so much about trying harder to be something different. It's becoming whole in who we were made to be. Yeah. And the way you put that just resonates so much with what I feel like God has put me here to do, and just our whole journey as humans. You mentioned doing, thinking, and feeling, and those centers of intelligence, and that's what we'll focus on here. I mentioned that thinking has been such a big part of my life all along, and I certainly, when I came to deal with my stuff and learned about feeling, it made a big difference. But the doing part has been a place where I still feel like, you know, that's where I need to be more intentional about. And you just, the way you opened up these centers of intelligence, so applicable to my own story.
Yeah, you know, there are a lot of 3s in the Enneagram, lots of groups of 3s, not number 3s. There are a lot of those too, but and the primary way to begin doing Enneagram work is to discover whether or not you are thinking dominant, feeling dominant, or doing dominant. And the way you discover that is by looking at the Enneagram from a depth perspective instead of a flat perspective. So let me give you a little bit of history about how that all came together.
Yeah.
An esoteric guy whose name is Gurdjieff kind of reintroduced us to the Enneagram in the 1940s. And he had a house in Europe where people could come, pay money to live there for a time to learn different spiritual practices and practice those. And people weren't talking about the Enneagram very much. And something that most people don't recognize is that nothing was published about the Enneagram till the 1970s. So people were drawing on the notes from people from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years who had a drawing of the Enneagram or some notes about that in some way. And there were 2 men from South America who were in Gurdjieff's school, Claudio Naranjo and Oscar Ichazo. And they went back to South America and worked with what they'd learned from Gurdjieff and did research and put together even a more complete look for us. And Naranjo came to California to teach a group of Jesuit priests who were spiritual directors. And I think 2 or 3 therapists were in the room. And one of those spiritual directors was Richard Rohr's spiritual director, and Richard Rohr was my spiritual director. So that's how I come to know the Enneagram. But what happened in the 40s is that at the same time, there was a man in England whose name is Maurice Nicole, and he wrote a paper that essentially said, you know, there are only 3 centers of intelligence, and they are thinking, feeling, and doing, and there aren't others. So people who were looking at the Enneagram then put Maurice Nicole's work on top of the Enneagram, and what they discovered was that reality from Maurice Nicole divided the Enneagram into 3/3. And if you lay Nicole's work on top of the Enneagram, then you find out that 2s, 3s, and 4s are feeling dominant, 5s, 6s, and 7s are thinking dominant, and 8s, 9s, and 1s are doing dominant. And at the same time, there was a German American whose name was Karen Horney, and she was doing her own work, and she wrote a paper saying that all people either move toward other people, move away from other people, or stand against other people.
Yeah.
And if you put that on top of the Enneagram, on top of what we came to call triads based on Maurice Nicole's work, then what you get is stances based on Karen Horney's work. Because in each of the 3 triads, there was one number that moves toward people, one that moves away from people, and one number that moves against people. And the reality is that I spend my life teaching people who they're not, so that they can let go of personality that they added necessarily in childhood in order to make their way in the world. And as it turns out, we all ended up dropping one of the 3 centers in childhood because it just didn't work well for us. And the other 2 did. And so as a 5, you're thinking dominant and feeling supports thinking, but you kind of dropped some doing in order to just think and have feelings about what you thought and have thoughts about what you felt. And my way of being in the world as a 2 is that thinking wasn't working for me. So I started feeling and responding to those feelings with doing. And we all kind of feel like, I don't know why I need that 3rd one. I've done okay with using 2, but the reality is we haven't done okay using 2. And I would say if anybody asks me what is the overall work of every aspect of the Enneagram, it would be to try to achieve balance in some way. And achieving balance with those 3 centers of intelligence means that we need to use each one for its purpose. And we need to learn in using all 3 that there are personality traits that we added in childhood that we just don't need anymore. And if we can allow those to fall away, which is kind of, not consistent with the cultural message for us, which is that we have to make everything happen. And if you try to make something happen using the Enneagram, you just make your personality bigger, not less.
Interesting. You put this in the book in a way that is so, I think, applicable to right where we are right now. We are in a season in the world and in our country with great division, economically, politically, ethnically, racially, even religiously. The pandemic, the stress that still remains, and as we're recording this, a new variant is just being talked about now, and who knows how that's going to actually play out, and just the angst, the frustration, the anger, and we're not moving toward wholeness.
No.
And so what an important time to have the very thing we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I decided to write this book before the pandemic. And I knew that I wanted to open by talking about liminal space, which is when we're not where we were and not where we're going. And the reason for that was because while liminality is a kind of a trendy topic right now, as is the Enneagram, trendy Enneagram is not the Enneagram that I teach.
You are a master.
Well, I'm thankful that it's trendy, but there's a lot of bad information in the world. And I think the reason that I wanted to kind of try to pull this all together into a way of making sure that I had done my part for us to avoid using the Enneagram inappropriately in typing other people or shaming other people, or, this is a personal journey to do Enneagram work. And I wanted somebody to understand the journey and where it would lead. And I think every journey is about the fact that we are on the way to not being where we were, and yet we've not arrived.
Yeah.
And so in that space, Actually, Father Richard Rohr told Joe, my husband Joe, and me, I looked it up. It was 22 years ago. He talked to us the first time about liminal space. And here's what he said. He said, it is the most teachable space, and it might be the only teachable space.
Wow. Wow.
And in Christian context, he said, just go back and read the Bible. God is always nudging God's people into liminal space. So then when the pandemic hit, I thought, oh my, I missed it. I'm late. And InterVarsity Press folks, my publisher, assured me that actually I was right on time, because everybody in the world is in liminal space.
Yeah.
So then the question gets to be, how does the Enneagram help us with that? What does it offer to us? And the answer is balance and a way forward. But, I don't know about your experience. My life experience is that I have heard teachers and read books and seen a movie at times, or my husband's a pastor, so I've heard a sermon at times that told me something that I knew about myself. I knew it was true, but I'd never had the language for it.
Yeah.
And I think it's very difficult to address something or try to have a transformative experience with something that you can't name. And maybe one of the top 3 gifts of the Enneagram is that it names those things for us, which saves so much time. And our earnest effort to be better human beings.
Yeah.
And somehow, and I think this is the mystical nature of the Enneagram, because I don't know any other thing that does it. Somehow the Enneagram offers all of this with no shame involved.
And to me, what the pieces that you just described of the Enneagram journey is just, it dovetails with what I believe God is about and the transformation he invites each of us into. I do a lot of my work in helping people understand and move forward in spiritual transformation. And a roadblock that I often hear from them is, well, I'm doing this, and God said he would do this, and it doesn't seem like I'm any different. It doesn't seem like I've changed, and they want to be zapped from here to there. And that's not how human beings function. I don't see that very often God does things that way. And so just the way you described, no shame, but honestly, where we are and where we are invited to go to become more whole. To me, that's good news.
Well, absolutely, it's good news. And for me, it's so honoring of who I know God to be.
Yes.
In my worldview, God is all benevolent and all loving and all for us. And so this idea that we are supposed to fundamentally change who we are in order to be loved, received, approved of by a loving God didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense to me. And I think what the Enneagram says is, this whole life journey is tricky. It's hard. And we all had to find a way to make our way.
Yeah.
And there comes a point when some of the protection that we needed, we no longer need. Some of the maturing that we needed, we've achieved. But I think we've been misled in some ways into believing that the ultimate goal is change, because the ultimate goal is transformation. And my way of talking about those two words are that change occurs when you take on something new. And, I've changed a lot. I read 2 books in the last 3 weeks that changed me in some ways. But I don't know if that change will become transformative because I just added more. And we are kind of addicted to adding. And maybe one of the great spiritual practices is the practice of subtraction instead of adding.
Wow.
And so I think we need to be given permission to allow parts of our personality, our Enneagram number, our personality type to fall away. And once we have that permission, then we're free to discover kind of what's underneath all of that, that is actually who we are, created and loved into being, I think.
You said something that I don't want to pass over too quickly. You said, let those parts fall away. You didn't say, okay, get angry at them and push them away.
Yeah.
You said, allow them to fall away. And you referenced spiritual practices. I don't want our viewers or listeners to miss that distinction between getting angry at a part of yourself and with self-contempt trying to not do something.
Right.
This is allowing it to fall away, and that's what transformation is, a part of it.
That's right. And when I first started to work with that word allow, which, that could be 20 years ago now, I guess. But to this minute, I'm aware that we don't use the word allow in our culture, except in negative connotation. We don't allow that here. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have a whole body of work to do individually around what does allowing mean. And I keep a little piece of paper on my bulletin board that is in my mother's handwriting, but she actually heard my husband say it in a sermon. And he said that peace and control cannot coexist.
Wow.
And I take it off the bulletin board sometimes because I can't stop being controlling and I just don't want to look at it anymore. But I put it back up on a better day. And I think we have been encouraged to control everything in our purview rather than allow. And I'm a part of the church, and so I get to critique the church as long as I'm in the pew. And I don't think the church overall, whatever denomination you want to talk about, has done a good job teaching us to live with mystery.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And it's very difficult to be palms up and allow when you don't know what's going to happen. And it's also very difficult to trust.
Yeah. And
yet, that is the journey for all of those who make up the great cloud of witnesses, isn't it? That you just do the next right thing and the next right thing and the next right thing. So my mantra every morning is, what is mine to do? And I figure if I can just do that one day at a time, I'm as close as I'm going to get. But that means that I have to allow opportunities to pass by because Joe and I have 4 children. We sent them all the way to college and they all came back. And they all live in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and they're all married, and we have 9 grandchildren. So for me to live my priorities, I have to allow lots of things to roll by.
Yep.
And understanding that I am predisposed to do life with just feeling and doing, and that I need to bring up thinking, means that if I do my work to balance those three centers, then it's much easier for me to know what's mine to do.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. You've alluded in just that description about spiritual practices. And I'd just like to, if you would, help us get explicit on perhaps some useful or beneficial spiritual practices for those in these different, triads and thinking, feeling, doing, and the different types. How can spiritual practices help us to, draw on the parts that we've repressed that we need and become more whole and all of that?
Sure. Okay, it takes a minute, but I'm just going to run through the 9 numbers and suggest a spiritual practice.
Yes.
First of all, for any of your listeners who don't know about me, my husband is a former Roman Catholic priest, and he went to high school seminary at 14. He's 74. He's had a spiritual director for 60 years. And in his days with the Vincentian fathers, they were not allowed to come home for 9 years. Family could visit them, but they really invested themselves in their lives and spiritual disciplines and spiritual practices that would stand them well in ministry. And so because of that, I get to be with this spiritual practitioner all the time for 38 years now. And he and I believe that the baseline for all spiritual practice is a contemplative practice, or contemplative prayer, or what a lot of people call doing a sit. I do a 20-minute sit every day. And honestly, sometimes I do 2. It's like I can tell by mid-afternoon that I either need to stop and do another one, or I'm going to do something that I have to clean up tomorrow. Yeah. So every number has told me the reason why they shouldn't do a contemplative sit. It's hard to do and there's no quick payoff. And so they all have an excuse. Like, so one say, oh, I can't do that because of the voices I hear. So my response to that is, I know you have a negative critic and I know that you hear it all the time, and I'm sorry. And if you'll learn to do a contemplative sit over time, meaning years, it will really help with that. So why don't you use prayer beads to find your way into that sit? So it turned out that Joe and I found out that every faith belief had prayer beads except Protestants. And so Joe created the prayers and the beads based on the fruits of the Spirit in the Galatians 5 reading for Protestants to pray with beads. So that handles that excuse. One's also a really good spiritual practice for ones is for you to read someone that you disagree with, because you tend to get a little too deep in your way of seeing that sometimes doesn't leave room for other ways of seeing. Yeah. For 2s, it's real important that we do things that are not always in the service of someone else. So aloneness, silent time alone, is not a familiar place for 2s, but it sets the table for transformation. So silence is a good practice for 2s. For 3s, they are so good at being whatever we want them to be that they sometimes lose who they are underneath all of that. Mm-hmm. And they begin to believe that we love them for what they do and not for who they are. Yes. So 3s really need to spend some time being aware of how they're the same no matter what group of people they're with, and then build that foundation as the foundation that they're going to work from. And so a good spiritual practice for 3s would not include the opportunity for success.
Yes.
For fours, fours are the only Enneagram number who are capable to bear witness to pain without having to fix it.
Wow.
So they have a real gift for being with people in their pain. And that's lovely, but it's a gift that they have, and they need to do very practical things. A good spiritual practice for a 4 is to clean out the garage, or to do the laundry and the shopping every week on the same day. For 5s, 5s tend to be so in their heads that whatever spiritual practice they choose needs to include doing. So whatever thought you have that you have great feelings about, you need to then do something with. And I also think beads are really good for 5s because it opens what's happening in your head instead of adding to what's happening in your head. And when you're praying beads, you have beads in your hand, you're saying specific prayers, and you're thinking. So you use all 3 centers. And it's a form of doing that keeps you in the rhythm of doing something rather than just thinking about doing something. 6s are kind of stuck right now in that there is a sin that's associated with or passion is a preferred word for me now, because I encounter so many people who've been injured by church or hurt by the church. So I try to use passion instead of sin. And for 6s, their passion is fear, which is better understood as anxiety. And right now there's fear everywhere.
Right.
It's just everywhere.
Yeah.
So 6s need to engage with a spiritual practice that gives them confidence. And the spiritual practice that I recommend right now to 6s, recognizing that there are all these other spiritual practices that are traditional spiritual practices that I think everybody should, choose and use. But I'm trying to just hone in on numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think 6s really need right now to practice these 2 things: trusting their own experience of God and of who God is, and trusting their own experience of life.
Wow.
Because 6s are finding themselves in a world where there's anxiety everywhere.
Yep.
I think there's kind of free-floating anxiety and anger falling on all of us right now, everywhere.
Yes.
But for 6s, their desire and their need is to feel safe. And I think they have to recognize that even though they don't trust themselves, we all trust them. And they need to begin to work on trusting their own experience and not relying on somebody else's.
Yeah, good.
7s have this phenomenal gift that is also their problem, and that's reframing. And they can reframe things in an instant. So I think a really good practice for 7s is to volunteer. I don't know how much time any 7 has, but enough time for it to be meaningful, meaning weekly, even if it's only an hour, in a place where things just can't be reframed. And that could be working with people who live on the street. It could be working at a soup kitchen. It could be volunteering in a hospital for children. I send lots of 7s to Scottish Rite Hospital here in Dallas to volunteer. And it's life-changing for them because it gets out of that habit of turning something that's difficult feeling to deal with into a positive.
Yeah.
For 8s, a great spiritual practice is waiting, just waiting. Stand back, don't take charge, even though people want you to, unless it's your job to do that. Let somebody lead who doesn't do it as efficiently or as effectively as you would, and make room for everybody's idea at the table, even though it takes extra time, and you're probably going to use your idea anyway. And for nines, I think a great spiritual practice is naming every day someplace in your life where your presence mattered. Because it's so easy for nines to believe that their presence doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And other people can't name that for them. They have to do it themselves. Mm. Now, if we had more time, which we don't, but if we did, I could go back through all of those things that I just suggested and show you how that's related to bringing up the center that you don't use. But the real work is that you can't skip to the end, and 3s, 7s, and 8s are inclined to do that. Just skip this first part of the book and get right to the end.
Yep.
And there is no transformation available in relationship to using the Enneagram in that process, unless you can manage your dominant center. Mm. So for 2s, 3s, and 4s, they're going to have to manage their feelings.
Yeah.
And for 5s, 6s, and 7s, they're going to have to learn to manage thinking. And for 8s, 9s, and 1s, they're going to have to learn to manage doing. Mm.
Beautiful. And of course, I couldn't help but relate it to my own journey. As a 5, I have found many times that I am more engaged in prayer when I am moving, when I am walking, when I am doing something, and just imagining that, bringing in the doing part of that, the doing center. Or when I am physically writing, when my hand is moving and I'm writing, there's something about the physical actions that do more than just praying in my head.
Right.
And there's connection that I experience with God in those actions, my body doing it, that is, I've just fairly recently come to realize that in life, just in the last few years, and it has been very significant. I'm just offering that because I can hear how, for in my own journey, that applies, and I'm sure it would be similarly in the other types as well.
Absolutely. You know, Richard Foster wrote a book, I guess 25, maybe 30 years ago now, The Celebration of Discipline, and it's a lovely companion, although he didn't write it with that intent, to the Enneagram, because he gives us opportunities and teaching about spiritual practices that are focused inward, outward, and upward. Mm-hmm. And they have to do with thinking, feeling, and doing. And so it's a really good primer for people who don't have a spiritual practice to choose one that might really be transformative. The trick is to choose the one that you least want to choose.
Yes.
Instead of the one that you're inclined to choose. Because the one you're inclined to choose, which if you want to choose both on top of contemplative prayer, that's fine with me. But the one you will be inclined to choose will certainly be one that just lends itself to your dominant center.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we could probably talk for 3 hours about these matters, Suzanne. And I just want to say that you're coming to my city in the spring, and I look forward to that teaching seminar. And I know you're going to be in many places across the country talking about the Journey to Wholeness over the coming months. Journey to Wholeness is available. You have a beautiful podcast that is just enlightening. And let me just give you a moment to invite people to whichever way to connect with you would like to.
SuzanneStabile.com will get you everything. So that'll get you where you want to go. Life in the Trinity Ministry will take you to our store, but SuzanneStabile.com will take you to Life in the Trinity Ministry. Mm. So it's all there. And we are doing 10 cities across the country in 2022. And we're real excited about that. We intentionally picked hub cities where we knew we had people who had been coming to hear me teach about 4 years ago, and started trying to work that so people didn't have to travel so far to be a part of work that I'm doing if they wanted to join us. So I'm real excited about the book. Yeah, I really love it.
Well, I love it. And I want
Thank
to
you.
encourage our listeners and viewers to take advantage of that. We will make sure that links are available under this video to the book itself and to SuzanneStabile.com. And if you're listening by podcast, in the show notes, those links will be there. It has been such an honor and a pleasure to have you with us here today, Suzanne. Blessings to you in all this activity over the next year and the way you help people experience their transformation journey.
Thank you so much. Right now, I'm just trying to wait with Mary to get to the birth of Christ again in our lives and in our hearts. We need it more than ever, and I'm very hopeful.
Amen. Amen, sister. Blessings to you during this season as well.
Thank you.
The journey toward wholeness. Wow, how we need that balance and transformation. I found a lot of wisdom for my own journey in this conversation with Suzanne, and I pray that you did as well. SuzanneStabile.com. Again, check the links under this video. We'll make sure that the links to both the book and Suzanne's website are there. And see this as another really comprehensive and powerful, tool and doorway and just pathway to move forward in your transformation journey. It doesn't matter where you're stuck. There is a forward plan that God has for you. And every time I end up contemplating or finding out more or learning more about the Enneagram, it can be such a powerful tool in that, and Suzanne Stabile does such an amazing, masterful job at helping us understand how that can be. So check out those links. I would love to hear from you, whether about this or any video that you see here. Just go to the contact page on our website, or you can leave a comment under this video, and I would love to hear from you. And until next time, God bless you.